Collage paper 89 is playing with marbles in paint. As you can tell from my cup, I have done this before. It's been a little while though. I'm using Liquitex Basics fluid acrylic with a little added water. You don't want it too thick or your paint won't work very well. I have done this with acrylic craft paint and the bottled acrylics at the library where I work. You want a container that is slightly wider than your paper. A close fit is good. And here's what happens when your paper is a little bit wider and there's just enough of a gap for the marbles to get underneath. It's a fun technique with a fun look that can be done in a variety of ways for variations. I am sticking with black, cutting down a sheet of paper. After pouring my marbles back into their cup, you can get your marbles onto the paper in different ways. The spoon is very convenient. The less paint on the marble, the thinner and less defined the line. You can drop them onto the paper and you can put them next to the paper for lines that don't start with blobs in the middle. Basically, just have fun with it. I have seen people use picture frames on top of their paper to achieve interesting looks with this. I think it would be fun to try painting some of the areas created by the lines when you don't roll your marbles over your paper as many times as I am in this video. I'm just having fun playing. But yes, if I wanted to create a piece like I've seen on Instagram where someone makes fewer lines and then paints some of the spaces created. One time when I did this project with a group at my library, I managed to get the most awesome big splatters when I dropped my marbles onto the paper, holding my pan at an angle like this. I have not been able to recreate it. This looks interesting, but it's not the look I was going for. I wish I could figure out if it was a matter of consistency. I tried different heights. As I said, haven't figured that out again. But this is all fun. Just play. Make fewer lines. Make more lines. Shake vigorously or more slowly. Use more paint. Use less paint. Use other colors. Try other colors of paper. I was going to add some bronze to my black next. Maybe I'll have to make that tomorrow's video. Or at least some form of making my black more metallic and using it some fun way. Maybe that should be this week's theme. Just fun. Friday night, I didn't share a collage paper because I was so busy collaging to meet a deadline of Saturday. So I shared what I was working on and asked who would be interested in learning this technique for this type of collage I make with only translucent layers. I will be working on tutorials and a class. But yes, finding time is difficult, and I need to work on my video setup. Back to collage papers, well, kind of, because we can basically use pretty much any paper we want for collage paper. And if there's any type of design you like to draw or color, you can find ways to incorporate it into your collage paper. I used a sneak peek at this week's Better With Art project. Pairs of lines and dots. Check description for idea credit. And if you're on YouTube binging art videos and need encouragement to get back to your own art, be sure to catch last Sunday's art prompt video and subscribe for more of my art content. I post small art prompts for my simple form of art journaling every Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Just a few more of my daily My 100 Collage Papers videos. And hey, don't worry when you mess up. Look at that. And we'll continue Wednesday project videos, but more focused after the 100 days. I was working on an experiment that I just didn't like how it was going when I decided what to do for collage paper 92. I'll be using yarn on the gel plate. I was concerned about using yarn, especially yarn that hadn't already been used with paint, because I was afraid it would be linty, but it worked pretty well. I started by putting down a layer of Brilliant Yellow Green, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Cadmium Red Light Hue, which will never not be my orange. Realized I should roll off some of that green before I used my orange. And Cadmium Yellow Light Hue. To use the yarn as a mask, you do not want to let this layer dry. What you do want to do is lay your yarn down in interesting patterns on the plate. This is my 8x10 gel press gel printing plate. There will be a link in the description for the pair I have, as well as the other materials I use in this video. As you can see, the end of this yarn is yellow. I'd used the 3 pieces I had cut to use, and it wasn't quite enough, so I used the 2 painty ones that were part of my failed experiment. Typically, a lighter paper is used for this. This is cardstock. It isn't my heavier cardstock, but it is cardstock. It would be easier with lighter paper. The goal is to make sure the paper is pressed down into all the gaps between the yarns to pick up the paint. My paper also picked up a lot of the yarn. I like how this turned out, but I did decide that I probably would prefer it if all of my ends of my yarn went over the edge of the plate. Next came pulling the ghost print with gloss medium. In typical Melinda fashion, I did apply too much. I used cardstock for the pull, as well as being well smoothed down onto the plate. This does have to dry. I didn't let it dry quite long enough, and it wasn't until the next day I realized what a factor the humidity was playing. So this is not an ideal pull, and I have the remains of the failed experiment paint in the other print, but they're interesting. One thing I was going to say about the previous paper is you may prefer it in layers. It wasn't my plan to do the layers for Collage Paper 93, but here we are. I thought it would be fun and wanted to do it, so did, and decided to invite you along too. I started with quinacridone magenta followed by phthalo blue. These are 2 parts of my typical limited color palette when doing tissue papers and small batches of painted paper, as I did a couple of weeks ago for Better with Art. You can check that video out at the link in the corner or in the description. These 2 along with cadmium yellow medium hue, previously dark, and Payne's gray in place of black. You would be amazed at how many different colors you can create with just those 4 colors. Next step again is laying down the yarn. I did decide to not leave any of my ends loose in the middle, and everything dried since the day before, so I didn't have to worry about any places of extra color left on the plate. Okay, let's speed things up. It'll be fun. This is another time we do not let things dry. Cardstock. Imperfectly aligned, but that's okay. Detaching yarns, and that's interesting, but I definitely think it needs another layer. But before that, the ghost print. Starting by cleaning things up a bit. Gloss medium. And as I mentioned in the last section, the humidity got the better of me today. I definitely did not wait long enough for this one. But there is definitely enough paint left on the gel plate to try again. I don't usually abandon so much paint on the plate, but I was done with that one. Back to aforementioned next layer, starting with cadmium yellow dark hue and quinacridone magenta. I'm liking the tiny brayer more and more all the time for spreading and blending the colors without over blending them. Isn't this beautiful? Some fun yarn placement, and the print, again, not perfectly lined up. It can be done better when needed. This left a surprising amount of paint on the gel plate, and the colors are a bit muddy, but I like the effect for this. You can plan things better when you're actually planning to add the extra layers. I decided to pull this directly because there was so much paint. And there is still quite a bit of paint. I do like what that layer added to the ghost prints. I'll pull what's left with gloss medium on a separate sheet of paper, first letting it dry. Unlike the earlier ghost prints, I did let this dry long enough. It should be difficult to pull off the plate, at least a bit difficult, when all of the layers are dry and adhered to your paper. So this gel plate play ended up with 3 very different looks with hints of each other. When I work in a limited color palette for a project, it's typically quinacridone magenta, cadmium yellow, medium hue, and phthalo blue for a fun variation on the primary colors, with something from the red, something from the yellow, and something from the blue family. Instead of black, I use Payne's gray, which is rather like a navy blue. A limited color palette doesn't always mean using the primary colors or variations of them, but using variations of them is what I recommend if you want to simplify creating a collection of papers for a piece. For me, that's typically tissue paper or other translucent papers, which is why I don't add the typical white, because white tends to make the paper more opaque even if it lightens the color. Just use more water. With something from the red family, yellow family, and blue family, you can create all those other greens and oranges and purples. And they're gorgeous ones. So this isn't really an awesome looking collage paper. I was more focused on just mixing colors, which that I didn't do an ideal job at showing you the great variation you can get. Variation that when you use them all together, you won't find anything that's glaringly, harshly different or clashing or out of place. So a limited color palette is not really limited when you're mixing your colors. So it's definitely not limiting. More than once last year, I tried to do the fun and easy painting with bubbles. It's supposed to be so easy and fun and quick, and you can do it with the kids, and all you really need to use is food coloring. Yeah, no, I never got it to work quite right. And what you don't see in this video is that I had just tried it with some leftover paint water I had. I don't usually have paint water that is that painty, but I kept it after last night's limited color palette video. It again didn't have enough pigment. Phthalo blue goes a long way, so I decided to try with a little bit of my Liquitex Basics phthalo blue paint. And I won't argue that it's a fun look when you get it to work, but getting it on the paper in the best way, I continue to struggle with. Don't even bother trying with a paint shaper, even if it's your biggest one, or a plastic spoon. Between spreading it on with the spatula and just setting the paper down onto the bubbles, I found that placing the paper onto the bubbles was the most efficient way to get a result I enjoyed. More clearly defined bubble marks, less froth. Maybe it's the type of dish soap I was using that makes the bubbles stick so much to whatever I scoop them up with, so it was hard to spread them on the paper unless I really spread them on the paper, destroying the larger bubbles and making blobs of color on the paper instead of defined bubbles. I don't remember enough about soap or bubble physics to know if that's even a reasonable theory. If you decide to try this, feel free to let me know how it goes for you. I tried to add a second color with way too little quinacridone magenta that was left in a tube. Looking back at the video, even though I just made it a little while ago, I realized I put in way more blue paint than magenta. Experimenting with using a wider container to cover more surface of the paper did not go well. That may have had better results if I had had deeper water. I kept tipping the sudsy pigmented water toward me, so it would be deep enough to work with the big straw. That caused having large bubbles on one end, unevenly dispersed bubbles. I tried to add leftover blue to create a purple, knowing that the blue goes further, and more magenta to the previous container. But yeah, nothing worked. Nothing. I didn't try anything more than the quinacridone magenta and adding some copper acrylic ink because I figured it's already liquid. It'll blend in better. It didn't really have any effect at all. I did end up with an interesting color, but there wasn't a lot of contrast with the blue. This was not a raging success. However, I probably will try it again. It's interesting, and I do really like how some of this came out. I hope seeing these experiments and favorite things has you inspired to make your own art. Give me a thumbs up if you are feeling inspired. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet to not miss any of my collage paper content, as well as my Better with Art small art prompts on Sundays. If you are watching and you haven't created anything in a while because you feel like taking the time is a waste of time, or you think it's too expensive, or you just need someone to encourage you and remind you to practice creative self-care with art making, check out my Sunday Better with Art small art prompts that can be done in an art journal or on paper if you don't have one. I am here on YouTube because I love making art and I love encouraging others to make art. Just 5 more collage papers after tonight, friends. But the Wednesday art videos and shorts will not stop. Wednesday videos can be more focused, so we can spend a little more time, get some more details about some fun projects. And I will be sharing more about how to make my style of translucent collage so much art fun ahead.